Okay, so today is going to be the last class, and hopefully you're going to find this one a bit more interesting. We're going to cover two topic areas today. The first we're going to cover is probably going to take only about an hour or so, is level crossings. If you remember from the statistics that I threw you, and I'll throw out a few more, but not too many. Level crossings are a big deal. In the railroad world, I don't care whether you're UIC, I don't care whether you're AAR, I don't care where you are in the world. Most people killed associated with railroads, and most people injured or associated with railroads are either at level crossings or are trespassers. People who are not on trains, who try to treat the railroad as sort of a private walkway, or they try just running across railway crossings very quickly. We're going to talk a little bit about what is done internationally to try to control this, and I also have a couple of very interesting videos that you're going to see, some of which are very interesting. Okay, Ron Gingiss is here. I just saw it in a text. Okay, good.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Okay, so I got to get rid of this live transcript on my screen. I get asked to put the live transcript on, and then it shows up on my screen, and I can't see the bottom of my screen. Okay, now I'm good. All right, so we're going to talk, like I said, first we're going to talk about level crossings and trespassers and that type of problem. And then we're going to go into switches and turnouts, and to include all issues associated with safety of turnouts. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the accidents that happen, but we're also going to get into a little bit of the engineering of the turnouts, which we really didn't cover last summer in sufficient detail. So I sort of leave some of that for this one. So hopefully we'll find this class quite a bit interesting. And then we'll talk a little bit about the exam that we have next week, which should be very, very, very straightforward, but to me. So let's see if I can share my screen this way. Okay, good. And move that out of the way. And let's see. Okay, so we're going to start with grade crossings. Yeah. And when I do it this way, it doesn't really allow me to write on the screen. So I don't really like to do that. Well, okay. Let me go back and do it the other way. Huh. Oh, there it is. Why couldn't I do it before this way? Let me just try one other thing here. Okay, so we're going to talk about grade crossing accidents. So if you recall, basically, if you look at the UIC statistics, which I showed you how to find last time, and this is older data, but it doesn't really change very much. Individual hit by a train is about 62%, and collision with an obstacle, which really includes level crossings, represent about 22, 23%. So roughly 85% of all accidents are either level crossings or trespassers. And again, you can see the same thing here. You can see trespassers in these statistic, and this statistic one represents 50% level crossing at vehicles, about 15%. Pedestrians at level crossings. In other words, somebody trying to walk across a level crossing represents about 8%. Pedestrians on public railway areas about 3%, and another, and you're looking at about almost 80% of all the of all the accidents are level crossings. And staff and passengers, they're very small numbers. Okay, and again, I'm not going to go through all the statistics, other than to say that if you look at fatalities and serious injuries, of the 910 reported in this particular reporting year, 756 were trespassers and 142 were level crossings. So basically 90%, no, more than 90%, probably 98% of all the fatalities are associated with either level crossings or trespassers. And the same number holds true again in the United States. I'm not going to go through all the numbers here. If you look at the United States numbers, again, 95% are represented for all fatalities. So what is a highway rail incident or level crossing accident? Is any impact between a railway and a highway user, which includes automobiles, motorcycles, trucks, bicycles. We have bicycle accidents in here as well. And it could be where the where the automobile hits where the railway hits the vehicle, or the vehicle hits the railway. Okay, again, trespassers, 462 fatalities in the US, far and away the largest number. Okay, so if we look at Israeli Railways rules for driving across the track, okay, and by the way, Israel is no different. Israel has significant number of level crossings, accidents. I'm sure you've all run into this from time to time here. I know I personally have been on a train when it suddenly got stopped because it hit something at the hit a vehicle at a level crossing, and it took us, we were delayed for quite a quite a long period of time. So Israeli rules for crossing a track: railroad track should be crossed only at established level crossings designated for the purpose. Upon approaching a level crossing, slow down to allow you to come to a quick speed. And this is something that people, unfortunately, people try to speed up, because if they think there's a train coming, they're going to try to beat the gate. So they try to beat the car, which is not always the world's best thing to go along. If there's even if there's no flashing light or warning bell, I like to tell everybody to watch, because it is possible that the barrier is not functioning. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen often. If you do have a light, if you have a bell, then you need to stop and don't do that. Drive continuously. Avoid changing gears. This is particularly true with trucks. there have been a lot of accidents, a lot of grade crossing accidents that have occurred when a truck changes gears while it's trying to cross the track, stalls on the track and can't move again. And unfortunately, that becomes a serious or dangerous situation. For pedestrians should always stop and look in both directions. There's an assumption that you can hear the train, that the train is so loud you can always hear it. From personal experience walking down the track, I will tell you that's not true. And those of you who have been out on track a fair bit will know that a train can really sneak up on you. So again, for pedestrians, and needless to say, when you're walking on track, this is doubly the case. But I'm talking when we're pedestrian trying to cross the track, look both ways. We've seen lots and lots of cases where we have trespassers walking down the track wearing headphones. So they're busily listening to they're busily listening to the music, and basically are totally oblivious to a train. And unfortunately, that's dangerous. Okay, let's see if we can mute everybody. Okay. Okay, so hopefully everybody is muted now. Okay, good. All right. Walk only in a straight line without stopping to cross the tracks. Again, that's going across the tracks. And only really should be at a designated place, but sometimes you'll have pedestrians walking, trying to cross the track any place along the way. Again, very, very dangerous and very great difficulty. And of course, pedestrians trying to use the railroad track as a shortcut or as a road is another incident that we see. We see a lot of that happening, and these are real issues. Pay attention to passing cars. One of the big problems, and we'll talk about this in another time, is if you have double track and you're trying to and you're going to walk across the track, and a train comes here, and this train goes by, and you start walking along the track, and you don't realize that a train can be coming in the other track in the other direction. Again, a very, very, very dangerous situation that we see happening. Unfortunately, I've seen accidents by professional railway workers getting hit by this as well. Do not cross the track if there's a chance for you to, if there's a possibility that you might be forced to stop on the track, if you're carrying baggage or disability. We're going to go back to that in an automobile because that's a really big issue as well. Never go across a barrier. Never go across a crossing while waiting for a train to come by. Don't go near the barrier device itself. The barrier can come down and hit you as well. So let's see if we can show a couple of interesting videos in this process. Let me see if I can do something here. Do I have? Yes, I am here. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of videos now. The first one, just to get everybody's attention. Let's see if we can get. Okay, so this is a live video from Argentina. Okay, so watch. This guy doesn't have any patience, and he's just trying to go across the crowd. Now, what happens here is sometimes the timing of the crossing is not right. Sometimes the timing of the crossing is such that you think a train's not coming, the crossing is not working. And then you figure, I'm going to just go right across the barrier, as you see over here. And then the train comes. So we see that unfortunately, this is a really common occurrence. This happens a great deal. Another thing that sometimes happens is if there's a lot of traffic and the traffic actually gets backed up on the crossing and people are going by. And so what happens is there's a red light, there's a traffic light further down here. And it's bumper to bumper traffic and you're just inching across the crossing. And people are just following the bumper traffic like they always do. And they don't even realize they were in the crossing. And all of a sudden they're stuck in the crossing and the gates come down. They have no place to go. And again, I'm going to show you that in a moment. So we'll talk about that in a couple of moments as well. So let me now switch to a different video. Let me get rid of this video. Okay, the next two videos I'm going to show you are actually television commercials, advertisements made in Australia. They're very graphic. They're not, and they make the point very well. But they're very graphic, and I'm sort of warning you that they're quite graphic. They're not bloody or anything, but they're graphic, and they will get to you in a second. But again, I want to make the point, and they make a couple of very good points. I have two of them, one for a grade crossing accidents and one for a trespassing. So we'll do the grade crossing one first. Again, this is an actual advertisement. Hold on, let me put the sound on again. Let me see how I get sound on here.
We have a sound, it's fine.
Oh, you heard the sound? Oh,
yes.
Okay. Very good. All right.
What's the hold up, Mom? Won't be long, kids.
Train schedules can change.
I did a painting at school.
Watch for the signs and never enter a crossing unless you are absolutely sure your exit is clear. You should never assume that there's no train coming. Don't play with trains.
Okay, as I said, it's a bit graphic. So a couple of points that I want to make here.
What's the hold up, Mom? Won't be long, kids.
Train schedules can change.
I did a painting at school.
Watch for the signs and never enter a crossing unless you are absolutely sure your exit is
So this is the scenario that I mentioned
clear.
where let me see if I can back that up a little bit. I can't. Okay. The previous one is the scenario I mentioned. There it is. Where you're in bumper to bumper traffic and you just keep going, and all of a sudden the gates come down around you, and you should never allow yourself to get in that scenario. There was a very, I'm going to say, infamous school bus accident that happened in Chicago, in one of the Chicago suburbs, a number of years ago, where exactly that happened. There was a traffic light, maybe 100 meters, or maybe not even that much, maybe 60, 70 meters past the crossing, and it would turn red, and the cars would back up, and there was a school bus that got caught just like this blue car did in this picture between the level crossings, and that's the one time where you really should think about trying to get out of there, even if it means breaking the crossing gates, going around the edge or whatever, but you really want, it really should be preventive. You should never let yourself be in that situation. And that's part of an educational program, which, as you can see in this particular slide. There was a very famous, not famous, there was another accident that took place actually about just a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, in Long Island, New York, where a woman who was driving a very, very expensive car, it was a Mercedes or something like that. She got into a grade crossing, and the grade crossing gate came down on her trunk, and actually she came down on her car. And this foolish woman, instead of getting the hell out of there because she's in a grade crossing out, she actually got out of the car and went to see what kind of damage the gate did to her car. And while she's busy looking at the damage the gate did to the car, along comes the train and wiped out her car and her as well. She was killed. So again, you got to deal with the priorities here. The other accident that this showed, let me see.
Don't play with trains.
Okay, so let's go. Let me go.
What's the holdup, Mom?
Won't be long, kids.
Okay, so the other accident, this guy here going recklessly down a crossing in a more rural area. Sometimes you don't even have gates. This one just had cross.
Train schedules can change.
I did a painting at school.
Watch for the signs and never enter a crossing unless you are absolutely sure your exit is clear. You should never assume that there's...
Okay, so you can see this is protected only by stop sign and crossbucks. And so this is a classical case where you really need to stop and look, because otherwise you know where the train's coming.
Train coming.
So what happens in many parts of the world is, and you have an accident like this, and the family of the people who are killed turn around and sue the railway. This happens actually in the United States a fair bit. They come out and sue the railway and say the railway's at fault. So it's gotten to, back a number of years ago, railroads started putting in forward-facing video cameras. Originally, they were put in there just for this purpose, so that if they were in a dispute over who's at fault, they would literally bring the video cameras out in the courtroom, bring the video out in the courtroom and show, look, the guy just pulled right in front of me. We also see cases where a truck or a car slams into the side of the train, which is even a little bit more interesting. That tends to suggest that we may have some drunk drivers or something like that. Okay, so that's the first Australian advert. The second Australian advertisement is a trespassing. So we have a bicyclist, and then we have a bunch of kids walking over.
You going on Saturday?
Oh, no, you?
Yeah. So, you want to come to my place tonight?
Yeah, all right.
Trains are big, deceptively fast, and can't stop quickly. Only cross the tracks at designated pedestrian crossings. But beware of the second train.
Okay, so the second one first. This is a case that, and like I said, I know railway workers who were killed based on this one, but This is an issue where you saw there was one train went by. She thought everything was clear. She came by, and along comes the second train. Again, this is a somewhat scary and dangerous situation. The other one you saw was a more classical trespassers. We've seen them with headphones. We've seen them with just chatting along the right of way, trying to use the railroad as a way to just go along that one. Okay, so that's the second video. I have one more video that I'm going to show in this sequence.
You saw it first here on 7, only on 7, exclusive pictures of a locomotive battering a car in Niagara County. The crash was all part of a special demonstration designed to try and save lives. Eyewitness News reporter Andrew Siff is here now with his Eyewitness News Extra tonight.
Keith, if you didn't get a chance to see the crash, you might not believe your eyes. And if you did see it, it might be worth seeing again. Railroad experts are convinced this will save lives.
So this was a staged
The crash, which Eyewitness News cameras captured exclusively, is a demonstration. Conrail engineers intentionally run a locomotive into our empty station wagon just north of Route 31 in the town of Cambria.
Ramifications can be.
And while this crash is a simulation, the risk is real. New York State monitors every public and private railroad crossing in the state and keeps track of the results. Of the approximately 500 public and private railroad crossings in Western New York State ranks this one as the most potentially dangerous. It is the Conrail main line at Eden Evans Center Road. State officials say it's the high speed of the trains, the number of cars, and the road which send the risk factor sky high.
They don't take and make the crossing easy. Throws your car out of whack and everything else.
Take another look at our crash video. Now consider that some drivers still go around the gates at Eden Evans Center Road and other crossings.
They're just taking no chances and, going in that direction. They really shouldn't be doing that, but they do anyway.
Is there a segment that doesn't quite appreciate how dangerous it can be?
And they say, well, gee, I was late for a dentist appointment, doctor's appointment, hairdresser, so on and so forth. That train is going to take maybe from 2 to 3 minutes to go across that crossing. And I think it's worth that wait 2 or 3 minutes to save your life. I think your life's worth that 2 or 3 minutes.
For our crash demonstration, state police donated their crash test dummies, part of a program called Operation Lifesaver, to drive home the point that railroad crossings are a real danger. Sergeant David Grisham explains why, in a real accident, these dummies would be dead.
If you have a 100-car freight train, that generally weighs in the vicinity of 12 million pounds. And a train striking a passenger vehicle would be very comparable to the same passenger vehicle running over an empty pop can.
Now, as we first reported, 188 people have been killed by trains in New York State in the last 5 years. But there is another less understood tragedy. The people on the trains scarcely feel the jolt, but sometimes have to undergo years of counseling after crossing accidents. More on that tonight at 6 p.m.
That's an interesting point that he makes at the end, too. Drivers involved in these type of accidents, it's very traumatic to the train driver. Even though there's no injury to the train driver in most cases, even though with a big truck, you can actually do damage a locomotive or a piece of maintenance away equipment. But generally speaking, the locomotive doesn't get damaged, but the driver is subject to a lot of trauma. Again, that's, I think, virtually every railway in the world, including Israel Railways, have special programs for counseling the driver, etc. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation here. Okay. Okay, I showed all 4 of those. Okay. All right. So why can't I, again, I don't have, it's not letting me. There we go. Okay, so let's talk about the different levels of grade protection. And then we'll talk about how do we, what are the different ways of addressing the issue. In fact, let's start off, but before we even get here, is saying that in general, there are three major approaches to be taken in trying to prevent accidents, either automobile or pedestrian or trespass or anything. The first is education.
Excuse me, three what? You said three something?
The three major techniques that are used to try to prevent accidents or fatalities.
Okay.
In English, we call them the 3 E's because they all start with the English letter E. Their education, enforcement, and engineering. And I'm going to do this in reverse order. I'm going to start off with the engineering, and then we're going to go into the education and the enforcement. But basically, education is given by some of the, like the advertisement you saw was part of several major education programs. And again, we'll talk about some of those programs and what's out there and what's available. Enforcement is literally having, using the laws around the books, giving people tickets, even having police on the trains, having cameras on the wayside. Those are all parts of enforcement. And then engineering is what are the different techniques you use to introduce protection at your grade crossing or level crossing. So that's really what I want to talk about here. So let's talk about the levels of grade crossing protection, or level crossing. Again, in some parts of the world, it's called a grade crossing. Some parts of the world is called a level crossing. In all cases, it's a road rail crossing where a road, either a highway or another type of road, crosses the railroad at grade. In other words, at the same level. So the first level of protection is the one that we saw in the first Australian video, where you only had signs. So pretty much the crossbuck, which is the railroad crossing sign, is pretty international in nature. I've come across versions of the crossbucks everywhere around the world. I've worked on railroads in 6 continents, and I see the crossbucks. They're ubiquitous. You see them everywhere. Usually, you have a crossbuck with some sort of stop sign. So usually, it's a combination, because typically the crossbuck is not a legal stop sign in many parts of the world. It's just a warning that it's a railroad crossing. So usually you have this combination of the crossbucks and the stop sign. This is the most basic level of signage. This offers you no other protection other than it tells the driver to stop and look and before he crosses. So this is a case where you probably have the most accidents in this type of scenario. The next case is where you have signs and flashers. By the way, there's another sign in Crossbuck over here. You can see this is a yield sign rather than a stop sign here. Okay, so the next one is the sign and flashers. So this is where we have electric lights, and usually there's a horn as well. Usually when you have a flasher, you have a horn, so you have lights and noise. Now this, of course, now requires power. These two scenarios do not require any wayside power. You can put them in the middle of nowhere. You're out in the middle of the Negev somewhere, and you're putting up and there's a road crossing, and you have no power available. Then you may have to do this. But once you put power in there, being solar power or anything else, you can start upgrading into the next levels. So as I said, the next level beyond a stop sign is the flasher lights. Now you notice you still have a stop sign, you still have the railroad crossbuck, you still have this railroad crossing sign, but now you have lights and bells as well. So now it's much more active, you hear it, and this also gets activated by the train. So now, in addition to requiring power, this also requires a track circuit. You now have to put a track circuit by the crossing to determine when a train is going to enter the circuit and set off the alarm. So this is not just a question of throwing a couple of lights. And by the way, here's another version. This is a British version. This is a picture from the UK. So you can see the crossbucks are a little different. The flashers are a little different. But again, this is not a question of just throwing these lights and a bell on there. You also need the track circuit because something has to set off those lights and bells. And so the financial step, the cost of going from signs to signs and crossings is actually quite significant because you're now putting in your track circuits. You also have to maintain your track circuits. You have to set the timing of the track circuits, etc. Okay, the next item up, and I did get an Israeli picture here, so you can see that here. So the next item up, so originally we just have the signs, then we have the signs and the flashers and the bells. Next one up is the gates. This is the one, these are fairly prevalent in Israel, so you see a lot of these in Israel. But you see, I'm sure you're all familiar with how gates work. Gates are nothing more than a physical barrier that comes down. By the way, gates by design are breakable. So if you have the scenario where you have a vehicle that's trapped between gates for whatever reason, by design, the vehicle can break the barrier. If you're stuck between gates, it's a good idea to get out there. You get out of there. And if it means breaking the barrier and having to deal with the cost of paying for a wooden barrier, so be it. It's a lot better than letting yourself being hit by a train, which is a much more brutal process. Again, gates will also have signs. Gates will also have lights. Gates will also have all of the previous types of protection, but it also has the physical barrier. And the configurations are different. Here again, this is a British scenario. You can see there are lights and signs and an overhead here, as well as lights and signs over here and the barrier over here. Okay, so typically and this is probably the most common type of grade crossing protection in busy railroad lines that you're going to see. So again, you can see here, you have your lights, you have your signs, you have your crossbucks, your railroad signs, You have more lights. So this is your stop light over here that goes here. These are your flashing lights. So in this particular scenario, you see there's a traffic control light, there's a crossbuck, there's a flasher, which also has bells. You have the gates. You have a sign telling you where to stop, plus markings on the road telling you where to stop. So this is the most common type of element you're going to find. Now, one of the issues which we saw in the Argentinian video is if you have this type of gate and this train is not quite there and the guy is getting impatient, he can drive around the barrier exactly like we saw in that Argentinian video and go across the track that way. So the next element up from your conventional gate system is what we call 4 quad gates or 4 quadrant gates. And in this particular case, rather than just have one barrier here for this train, for this vehicle, and one barrier here for this vehicle, it has 4 sets of gates. So that comes down and blocks all 4 quadrants of the grade crossing, which means that for a vehicle can't just simply drive around the gates anymore. The only way to get across at this point in time is to crash through the barrier. And studies have shown that drivers are much more reluctant to crash through a barrier than to simply drive around it. As long as you can drive around the barrier, it's relatively easy and not an issue. Psychologically, there's a great hurdle. Even though these barriers are designed to be breakable and they're not intended to fix them, they by having coming across the 4 quadrants like that, they give a greater barrier to the driver, even if it's, like I said, psychological but it is functional as well. The next item up, and this is something I will say you don't see very often, are actually security barriers. Now you get to see a lot of them in Israel because I remember when if you go to the when I go to the Rakevet Yisrael training center near I guess that's in Lud. I remember always having to go through that big security barrier. So a security barrier is not like this. It's not a flimsy wooden barrier. It's a real physical barrier. But for the most part, we don't really want to do them in a grade crossing scenario. And why? Because what happens if there's a car stuck between the barriers? And if you have a physical barrier like that, you just killed the person, because there's no way escaping it. So these barriers are security control barriers. And again, you see a lot of them in Israel, so I know you're all very familiar with them, but they're not very commonly used as a rule in normal grade crossing applications. Again, because the last thing in the world you want to have happen is have a car stuck between 2 of these barriers with a train coming, because he can't get out of this barrier. And then finally, there's the ultimate solution, which is grade separation. So we have our railroad here on top here, and we have our highway down, in this particular case, below. So it's interesting because here you see a level crossing, but here you see a grade separation. So grade separations are when you build high-speed rail lines. So if you take a look at even the New Jerusalem Tel Aviv high-speed rail line, you look at high-speed rail lines, Amtrak in the Northeast Corridor, Germans, the French, the Japanese, even the new British high-speed line. There you introduce grade separations, where you physically separate the track from the roads. And like I said, you can also do an overhead bridge. If I can come in there and put an overhead bridge for the highway. You see a lot of those throughout the world. So this is far and away the safest way to do it. So the logical question becomes, why don't we do this everywhere? And the simple answer is it costs too much. By frame of reference, let's take the United States. In the United States, there are about 200,000 grade crossings in the United States, plus or minus. And a very large percentage of them are out in the middle of nowhere, so they're nothing more than a stop sign and crossbucks or a yield sign and crossbucks. If you wanted to grade separate each one of these, a grade separation project is millions of dollars. You can't grade separate for $100,000. You're in the millions of dollars of range. So if I have 200,000 crossings, and let's say it costs me $2.5 million to do a grade separation. So what am I looking at? $500 billion, $500 billion to grade separate all the grade crossings in the United States. There's just simply not that kind of money available. So grade separation is where you put in when you have real serious operations. Most of the time, it's when you're in high-speed operations or where it's relatively easy, relative with a small r, to put an overhead crossing or something like that. But even a simple overhead bridge is going to cost you significant monies. Okay. So continuing on to what we talked about, this goes back, I'm going to reintroduce the 3 E's here. So we just talked about engineering, and that's physically ranging from just putting some simple protection in there to full grade crossings. Then we have education and enforcement. Those are my 3 E's. So let's talk a little bit about education, because education is a big deal. For example, in many parts of the world, there's something called Operation Lifesaver. Operation Lifesaver is an educational campaign that produces videos. So the 2 Australian advertisements that I showed you were made under Australian Operation Lifesaver. The video that staged accident where the locomotive ran over the vehicle with all the cameras there, so where they had the dummies inside of it, that was staged by Operation Lifesaver. And those videos and those kinds of materials have been developed. The UIC, in addition to cooperating with Operation Lifesaver, also sponsors an International Level Crossing Awareness Day. And they generate a whole bunch, and so they have a whole program, which is International Level Crossing Awareness, and they generate all sorts of material like this. So for example, this is an example of the type of material by country, and you can see Israel is right over here, where they have the International Level Crossing Awareness Day. This is actually the logo. If you look here, that's an ILCOAD, International Level Crossing Awareness Day. And again, you can see that type of activity here. So in fact, let me just real quickly show you some of the websites. Oh. What am I doing here? Hold on a second. Okay, so okay, so this is the Operation Lifesaver website. This happens to be the US ones. And you can see there's all sorts of information available, statistics, video in this. You have all sorts of material. You can download material from the site here. For example, you can go to materials and you can view all sorts of informations. You can see you can download PDFs. You'll have videos in here. There's children videos here. So let's just.
Alan, we don't see the what you're showing. We are still in the presentation.
Oh, you're not seeing what I'm showing? Okay, let's see if I can do it this way. Can you see Operation Lifesaver now?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go back to the top here. Okay, so this is an Operation Lifesaver website, which you can see oli.org is the address of it. OLI is Operation Lifesaver Inc. And you can see it has the ability of downloading. There's tons and tons and tons of material that's available. Almost all of it free that you can just download, and you can see children cartoons that are available.
In this scene, you finally express your zombie love for each other.
I love you.
I feast on your brain. Amazing!
So you can see this is a site where you can literally download hundreds of pieces of information. In fact, you can sort. You can just look for. So let's say we wanted to just look for material for grades pre-K to K2, and we're looking for videos.
Alan, whose site is it? It's the US?
This happens to be a US site. Yes.
Okay.
This is the oli.org site. Now the UIC site. If you want to go to the UIC site, the UIC has, let me just see if I have that here. There we go. This is the International Level Crossing Awareness Day site. So this you can see this is ILCAD, International Level Crossing Awareness Day.org. So this is a UIC site. And again, just very quickly, you look at the countries that are participating in there. And you can see Israel is a member and does participate in the International Level Crossing Awareness Day material. And again, you can go here and you have access to various videos. And other material, etc. So again, this is information that, these are the two big sites. One is the International Level Crossing Awareness Day, and the other one is the Operation Lifesaver. There's an Australian and a British version of this as well. I happen to like this one better because I think they happen to have a lot more material in it. There's literally thousands of materials. Like I said, I just did a quick check for grades pre through K. And, again, you can see very quickly, the little cartoons. I'm not going to spend that time. But you can see just.
Bertie, we can play hide and go seek in here.
just wonderful material that is available for training, for education purposes and all here. Okay, so let's come back to my slide presentation. Does everybody see the slide presentation? Are we back on the slide presentation?
Yes. Okay,
good. All right. So as I said, you have the ilcad.org site for this, and you have the oli.org site for this one. Both of them are, or just Google search Operation Lifesaver or Google search International Level Crossing Awareness Day, and it'll take you right to the right sites. And again, the relevant information you can see here. Okay, the other item we did talk about was enforcement. Enforcement has to do with having, you can see here, this is again a UK picture. This is a UK police officer on board the train with a walkie-talkie watching for people who are violating level crossings, etc. It's enforcement we find varies quite a bit from country to country, and it's something where there's room for improvement there. One of the things that also happens, we're seeing more and more, is putting cameras in at the level crossings by the police officers, not just having them on the trains, but having by the police officers. Again, this is in the UK. This is a level crossing camera that's designed to capture vehicles going past gates or going past a scenario where they're not supposed to be going. I will mention that in very busy areas, not only do you have crossing gates, but you have pedestrian gates here. So this is a good example where there's a set of, this is a combined, this happens to be in Philadelphia, so I happen to know this particular crossing. But in this particular case, there's one set of gates for automobiles, and there's a separate set of gates for pedestrians. So again, it's designed to prevent the pedestrian from going across this rather busy intersection. This is a very attractive public walkway, and people are always crossing over to take this nice walking path here. It happens to be along the Schuylkill River. It's a very, very attractive walking path, and so they put in these pedestrian gates to go with the automobile crossing gates. Okay. Any questions about level crossings or about anything that we've talked about up until now? Again, I want to encourage you to, on your own, you can go look at the Operation Lifesaver site or the International Level Crossing Awareness Day site, and just see what they have to offer. I know there's material in Hebrew here. You just have to just go through a search. The Operation Lifesaver is 100% English, but the Level Crossing Day has multiple languages. You can see French, Czechoslovakian, again French, German, Portuguese. I was quickly trying to see Hebrew, but I probably have to do a search for it. Okay, let's take our break now, because then after the break, I want to go right into grade crossings. Sorry, I want to go into turnouts, switches and turnouts, and spend the next 3 hours or 2.5 hours or so on switches and turnouts. So let's take our 10-minute break, and we'll see you. I got 5 after, so let's meet at, well, let's meet at 20 after. We should take a 15-minute break. Let's meet at 20 after, and we'll discuss it. Okay, stop sharing.